Beijing. This is Global Watch.
Hello, welcome to Global Watch, a news magazine program giving you insights into the latest global affairs. I'm Pan Deng in Beijing. First, the headlines. Chinese President Xi Jinping has landed in Hanoi and it's set to meet with his Vietnamese counterparts, where the two leaders will look to deepen their countries' cooperation. Southeast Asian leaders gather in Manila ahead of the 31st ASEAN Summit will take a look at what issues they plan to tackle in some of the most anticipated face-to-face meetings. Resigned Lebanese Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri meets with Saudi Arabia's King Salman as Beirut continues to accuse Riyadh of meddling in state affairs. That's a successful wrap for this year's Double 11 shopping bonanza in China. Alibaba Group smashes yet another record, this time generating a whopping $25 billion in 24 hours. We start in Hanoi, where Chinese President Xi Jinping has just landed to initiate a state visit to Vietnam. This is President Xi Jinping's first state visit to a foreign country since the 19th National Congress of the Communist Party of China. Now you're watching live footage from Hanoi's International Airport. This is Chinese President Xi Jinping's plane. He just landed in the Vietnamese capital to start his first state visit to a foreign country since the 19th National Congress of the Communist Party of China. The top leader of the Communist Party of China and President of China will hold talks with Vietnamese Party General Secretary Nguyen Phu Trong and Vietnamese President Tran Dai Quan. According to the Chinese Foreign Ministry, this visit is aimed at deepening strategic communication between the two parties and the two countries, while expanding practical cooperation and people-to-people exchanges. The meetings look to deploy the development path of bilateral relations in the new era. Again, you're watching live footage from the International Airport in Hanoi. Chinese President Xi Jinping has just landed there. Now, for more details on this visit, let's cross live to our reporter Li Jiejun in the Vietnamese capital. Hello, Jiejun. Tell us more about President Xi Jinping's agenda in Hanoi.
It's a busy day for Chinese President Xi Jinping. He just landed at Hanoi Airport at 12 a.m. and he will attend the inauguration ceremony at Vietnam-China Friendship Building at 4 p.m. And after that, he will have a bilateral talk with his counterpart, General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam, Nguyen Phu Trong. Then he will also meet Chairwoman of National Assembly, Ran Kim Yen. She will also attend a photo exhibition entitled Built for Vietnam, Built for China at Ho Chi Minh Museum. And he will finish the day by attending the state banquet held by Vietnamese President Tran Dai Quan. And that's really a very tight schedule, Pan Deng.
Well, Jiejun, what is the Vietnamese media saying about Chinese President Xi Jinping's state visit?
Well, 2017 is an important year for Sino-Vietnam relations. In January and May, General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam, Nguyen Phu Trong, and Vietnamese President Tran Dai Quan visited China respectively, and the two countries signed a series of documents to push forward cooperation in various aspects. And this is Xi's first overseas trip since being re-elected as General Secretary of the Communist Party of China Central Committee last month. And this shows that he attaches great importance to bilateral relations. And analysts say Xi's visit will continue to boost the two countries' traditional friendship and open a new chapter for the bilateral relations. Back to Pan Deng.
Thank you very much, our reporter Li Jiejun in the Vietnamese capital. Now, for more insight into this state visit, we're joined in the studio by our current affairs commentator, Mr. Xu Xingduo. So, Mr. Xu, let's start with the timing of President Xi Jinping's visit. It's his first state visit to a foreign country after the 19th CPC National Congress, and this is his second state visit to Vietnam since 2015. What does the timing tell about the significance of this trip?
Well, China and Vietnam, they share similar or identical political systems and ideology. Both are socialist countries run by communist parties. So they have a very effective communication, not only is about on state-to-state level, but also on party-to-party level. So you see, after the 19th Party Congress, the Vietnamese side sent a special envoy to congratulate the successful conclusion of the Party Congress. And then afterward, China sent a special envoy to Vietnam to brief the Vietnamese side on what has been achieved and what happened during this Party Congress. So you can see this close communication, close relationship between the two parties and the two governments, actually. So the choice of Vietnam as the first overseas stop after the Party Congress by President Xi Jinping shows the importance China gives to the relationship with Vietnam. I think this is a clear demonstration of how much importance China gave to this neighborly relationship here.
So tell us more about this framework of high-level exchanges between China and Vietnam. Just as you mentioned, the two countries are both led by communist parties, and President Xi Jinping will also meet the Vietnamese president this time. What can we expect?
Well, this is for the Vietnamese side. There are actually, in terms of the content of the bilateral relationship, it's not only political. We know, like earlier in January, the the party secretary of the general secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam, paid a visit to China in May. The president of Vietnam also visited China to participate in this international cooperation summit of Belt and Road Initiative there. And then you have Xi Jinping in Vietnam. Basically, on a party-to-party relationship side, you have very concrete content for the Vietnam side that looking to better align their a vision, so-called what do you call a one circle, two corridors, one circle with the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, and also for the Vietnamese side, they need a lot of investment, and also financial cooperation is high on their agenda. For example, preferential loan from the Chinese side, and also soft loans from the bilateral and trilateral framework, usually the AIIB, Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, led by China. So this is very important to the Vietnamese side.
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Xu. We'll be getting back to you on this, but now let's get more coverage. First, you're watching live footage from Hanoi International Airport. Chinese President Xi Jinping has just landed in the Vietnamese capital to start a state visit. And China and Vietnam, two neighboring socialist states, have secured a strong relationship since they forged diplomatic ties 67 years ago. Bilateral trade volumes have steadily increased over the past years and are expected to exceed $100 billion this year. According to data from China Customs, Vietnam has become China's largest overseas source of rice, coffee and tropical products, with trade volumes still growing by double digits. China in turn has been the largest trading partner of Vietnam for the last 13 years. Located along the Belt and Road route, Vietnam is no doubt one of the most appealing markets for made-in-China products and technologies. The two countries issued a joint statement in May and signed a framework memo to speed up the linking of the Belt and Road Initiative, and Vietnam proposed 2 corridors and 1 economic ring plan. The total span of the cross-border economic zone covers nearly 140,000 square kilometers and includes more than 39 million people in the region. Hanoi's first urban elevated railway is expected to be fully operational next year. The project is a combination of Chinese technology and Vietnamese culture, and it lays a foundation for Vietnam's future railway development. Doing reports.
The first urban elevated railway in the capital city of Vietnam. The 13.5-kilometer-long Cat Lang Ha Dong urban rail route was constructed by the 6th Bureau of China Railway Engineering Corporation, costing more than $800 million. The project is a perfect mix of bilateral exchanges, with Chinese technology standards and equipments are fully applied, and Vietnamese cultural elements embraced for design.
We chose the color green as the appearance of the carriage because green is the Vietnamese favorite color. We also put the image of a pavilion in the front, which is the cultural symbol of Vietnam.
Not only are technologies being provided and capital being offered, but also a cross-cultural experience. The Chinese company has not only trained staff to meet a high standard of management, but has also sent some Vietnamese employees to China to get the first-hand knowledge about train operations.
We pass on our experience to Vietnamese staff without any reservation. We hope that a large number of local professionals in management and construction can be cultivated through our training. This will help lay the foundation for Vietnam to develop its urban rail system in the future.
The railway project began in 2011 and is expected to be fully operational next year. The China Railway Engineering Corporation says the new railway will accommodate an estimated 14,000 passengers per hour and help ease traffic congestion in the increasingly urbanized city of Hanoi.
We consider this a very important project because, as you know, that Hanoi is also a very big city with a population very high and traffic very heavy. That is one of the effective way out of how to way out of traffic congestion in the capital of Vietnam. It also is a symbol of friendship between China and Vietnam.
Traffic congestions like this have been dragging down the development in many Vietnamese cities like Hanoi. Even though that just one elevated railway will not solve all the problems, it will be of great help in easing the pressure and, more importantly, providing a new solution of building the network to solve the problem in the years ahead. So Yun, CGTN, reporting from Hanoi, Vietnam.
And you're watching live footage from Hanoi's international airport. Chinese President Xi Jinping has just landed in the Vietnamese capital to start a state visit to the country. And Chinese investment, meanwhile, is flowing into Vietnam as the two countries deepen economic bilateral ties. Bac Giang, a province in northeast Vietnam, has witnessed a rising number of Chinese-funded enterprises settling in. Of the 180 foreign enterprises in the province, one-third are Chinese. These enterprises have created massive job opportunities for local people and helped to boost the country's economy.
With the advancement of the Belt and Road Initiative and the 2 corridors and 1 economic circle plan, Chinese and Vietnamese enterprises are stepping up cooperation. Vietnam's largest textile manufacturing base and largest photovoltaic manufacturing base are supported by Chinese-funded enterprises.
In the past 3 years, as the Belt and Road Initiative is put into practice, more and more bid and qualified Chinese-funded enterprises have entered Vietnam.
While creating vast job opportunities in Vietnam, Chinese-funded firms are also nurturing a sense of security and belonging in their employees. Vina Solar Technology, which has set up shop in Bac Giang, has hired over 5,000 Vietnamese employees. Wu Shui was hired to work there 3 years ago. Now, she has been promoted to the role of a supervisor as her work skills and Chinese proficiency has greatly improved.
I have learned a lot while working here. The Chinese colleagues are also willing to teach us because photovoltaic technology is a new industry in Vietnam. Few people know about it, so we have to learn.
As of July 2017, Chinese direct investment in Vietnam reached a total of $4.33 billion, with $590 million recorded.
Now you're watching live footage from Hanoi International Airport. Chinese President Xi Jinping has just landed in Hanoi, and you're watching live footage. President Xi Jinping has arrived in the Vietnamese capital to start his state visit to the country. And President Xi Jinping just attended the 2017 APEC Economic Leaders Meeting in the Vietnamese city of Da Nang, and after that, he flew to the country's capital, Hanoi, to start his state visit. He is there at the invitation of both his Vietnamese Communist Party counterpart, Nguyen Phu Trong, and the President of Vietnam, Tran Dai Quan. The visit aims to deepen strategic communication between the two parties and countries and to expand practical cooperation as well as people-to-people exchanges between the two countries. So, Mr. Xi, Chinese President Xi Jinping has arrived in Hanoi to start his state visit to the country. So earlier we briefly touched upon this topic of the combination and synchronization of the two countries' development paths. China has proposed this Belt and Road Initiative, and Vietnam proposed 2 corridors and 1 economic circle. How do you think the two countries' leaders will make these two combined together as a two-way street for the two countries?
Well, this is almost like a perfect match for the two countries because, if you look at the industrial capacity cooperation, because China basically is in the upstream and Vietnam in the lower stream here. And so for the capacity here in China, some of the companies like textile companies, they can move to Vietnam to enjoy the advantage of like a lower salary of the workforce and also this opening policy basically in Vietnam. So they can continue their function and sell the products overseas to the US, to China, and to other ASEAN countries. So this is a part of the cooperation. And also, if you look at the alignment of the two initiatives, the Belt and Road, and the One Circle here. So this is really about industrial cooperation, which is critical to Vietnam because industrial cooperation, industrial construction, or the lack of transport, say, facility, that is one of the major bottleneck for the Vietnam economic development. So they are asking for, say, more investment from China and more participation of Chinese companies to build the road, ports, bridges, and airports, etc., to help build a network of the country to transport all the goods, the services, and the people, and to really help the country to push the upgrade of the economy to another level.
Right, so it's highly complementary.
That's for sure. And also, if you look at the border area, because the two countries are basically connected with with rivers and the baths here. So on the Chinese side, you see the highways and well-established road. But on the Vietnamese side, there's a lack of parallel, lack of a comparable infrastructure, so as to further facilitate the border crossing trade area.
And that could also be seen as an opportunity for Chinese enterprises. As we just reported, Chinese investment into Vietnam is booming very fast. What could be the opportunities and challenges there?
Yeah, for the Chinese, the opportunities obviously, as we mentioned, about the low salary and also the country's policy basically to attract foreign investment to help them develop the economy, because the investment will create jobs in addition to tax revenues, right? And also, of course, you talk about the problems, and I think mostly basically the differences between Vietnam and China. Let's say tax system could be different. You got to be careful. You got to read through carefully about their documents, government documents. And also, while you are enjoying a low salary of the workers, at the same time, you probably need to pay more attention to the training of the workers in order to have the efficiency, in order to have the desired worker performance of those workers. And also, as we mentioned about the bottleneck, one of the bottlenecks is another part is like the lack or shortage of power generation. So sometimes the companies need to prepare probably a power generator in case there's a blackout, so you can continue your production there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Xu. We'll be getting back to you. Chinese President Xi Jinping has met with other Asian leaders on the sidelines of the APEC meetings in the Vietnamese city of Da Nang. Talking to his South Korean counterpart Moon Jae-in, Xi Jinping reiterated China's stance on the anti-missile system THAAD, which strained ties that have recently eased. Moon Jae-in said his country did not intend to harm China's security interests with THAAD. They also agreed to seek peaceful solutions over the Korean Peninsula tensions. In talks with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, President Xi Jinping urged Japan to take more practical actions to improve ties and urged a constructive approach to manage differences. Shinzo Abe said Japan hopes to increase high-level exchanges with China and deepen trade. And Xi Jinping told Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte that bilateral relations are at a new starting point. He said China will continue to treat its neighbors with amity and mutual benefit. Duterte said maritime issues will be properly handled on a basis of consensus. Now, for more on the 2017 APEC meetings. Let's get back to our current affairs commentator, Mr. Xu Qingduo. So, the theme for this year's APEC gathering is creating new dynamism, fostering a shared future. And what do you make of the China proposals raised by President Xi Jinping this time at APEC meetings?
Well, globalization is a key. He gave a very positive assessment of what globalization has brought to mankind, especially the developing countries and poorer countries. China is one of them, basically, who benefits heavily from globalization, from participating in the process of global trade and free trade. So President Xi proposed, let's continue with a new type of globalization, which focuses more on being inclusive, being balanced, being fair, let's say, because if you look at the rise of protectionism, the rise of the national economic nationalism, let's say, in some of the developed countries, mostly because middle-class people or lower middle-class people, they found that somehow globalization have failed them in terms of their income, in terms of their improving their livelihood. So that's why there's such an anti-globalization trend. But here in Asia, East Asia, Southeast Asia, the understanding basically there's a consensus, there's no dispute. Let's continue with the globalization. Of course, we'll pay more attention to the people who might be somehow lagging behind the whole process. I think that's it. And also, if you look at China's vision, especially President Xi, that's the community of a shared future. That's exactly the same with this APEC theme here. And the dynamism basically is referring to, you can understand that as a connectivity. If you build more road bridges and people-to-people exchange financial connectivity, and then you have this integrated effect that is like every country participating in this like a regional free trade agreement will benefit hugely for their economic growth and their trade.
And the regional diplomacy is quite busy in these days. We know that Southeast Asian leaders will meet in Manila for the 31st ASEAN summit. So what's your view on China's role in the next stage development of both Southeast Asia and wider Asia-Pacific region?
Well, I think, if you look at in the past, especially in the first 20 years, China attracted a lot of investment, say, from East Asian economies, including, say, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Malaysia, and other countries, regions here. And for the next stage, you would see China is growing its economy more developed, more dependent on consumption and technology and innovation-led model instead of say export-driven or having investment-driven economic growth. So as China's market of consumption grows larger and larger, you can see more and more products from Southeast Asian countries, from Vietnam, from Singapore, from Malaysia. They will come to the China market and they would find a huge market destination for their products, for their services. And also China is increasingly become the largest source of tourism. For Vietnam, it's a case. For Malaysia, it's a case. Probably for Indonesia, for many countries in this region, Chinese tourists will provide a booming period for their to develop their scenic spots. That's it.
Thank you very much. Our current affairs commentator, Mr. Xu Qingduo there. U.S. President Donald Trump and Vietnam's President Tran Dai Quang have held a joint press conference in the Vietnamese capital, Hanoi. Trump is paying a state visit to Vietnam after attending the APEC gathering in Da Nang City. The U.S. President will next head to the Philippines for the 31st ASEAN summit in Manila, the last stop of his Asia trip.
In the spirit of our friendship, I want to congratulate President Quang for hosting a very successful APEC leaders meeting this week in Da Nang. Congratulations, you did a fantastic job. Thank you. As I stated in my address to the APEC CEO Summit on Friday, the United States is committed to a free and open Indo-Pacific where strong, independent nations respect each other's sovereignty, uphold the rule of law, and advance responsible commerce. We look forward to achieving a bilateral trade agreement with partners who abide by the principles of fair and reciprocal trade.
21 leaders converge in the Philippine capital Manila starting from Sunday for the 31st ASEAN and related summits. They include U.S. President Donald Trump, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang, and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Among issues, they are expected to tackle the nuclear crisis on the Korean Peninsula, terrorism and the Rohingya crisis. One of the most anticipated face-to-face meetings is also set to happen, the one between Donald Trump and Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte. Barnaby Lowe reports.
Let us now witness.
When leaders of the 10-member Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, gathered in Manila earlier this year, they expressed, quote, grave concern over the escalation of tension on the Korean Peninsula. Several months later, tensions remain. As the region's leaders converge in Manila again, there's little doubt that the Democratic People's Republic of Korea's nuclear program will dominate discussions.
I believe that the direction is even more sanctions. So the United Nations Security Council just passed new sanctions, even more punitive, a month ago. I think the pressure right now is on ASEAN to completely cut off any kind of economic ties they have with North Korea.
This, especially as U.S. President Donald Trump will be in attendance. Beginning in Japan, Trump has taken every opportunity to talk tough on the DPRK in his 5-nation Asia tour.
What ASEAN does in terms of sending a very clear signal to the North Koreans that their provocative behavior is unacceptable to ASEAN, I think is very important.
That's not to say, however, that the DPRK nuclear weapons issue will be the sole focus of the Manila meetings. Leaders are also expected to continue talks on territorial disputes in the South China Sea, the worsening Rohingya humanitarian crisis, as well as the ASEAN economic community, among others. They're also expected to hold bilateral meetings, the most anticipated of which, the one between Trump and Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte.
It has been one of the most anticipated selfies, if ever they take a selfie or a picture together. As they say, a picture could speak a million words. So if you have Duterte and Trump side by side and both of them doing the Duterte fist, you can imagine the publicity multiplier impact it will have.
Will that publicity be good or bad, though? Because while military ties between the U.S. and the Philippines have never been stronger, with the U.S. significantly contributing to victory over ISIL allies in Marawi, Duterte's war on drugs remains a contentious issue. The question is, will Trump take up the issue of human rights with Duterte? Barnaby Lowe, CGTN, Manila.
And let's cross live to our correspondent, Barnaby Lowe in Manila. For more on this, Barnaby, let's start with the DPRK issue. Do you see the coming of a consensus among ASEAN leaders this time regarding this particular problem?
Well, Pandang, there's always been consensus on this issue with regards to the nuclear weapons of the DPRK among ASEAN member nations. Remember, in past ASEAN meetings here in Manila, both in April and in August, ASEAN leaders as well as foreign ministers condemned the DPRK's nuclear weapons program, and they expressed grave concern over the escalation of tensions on the Korean Peninsula. What there has not been consensus on is the action that has been taken by ASEAN member nations. Yes, there has been consensus on their statement, but they have not cut trade ties. Most ASEAN nations have not cut trade ties with the DPRK. The Philippines has cut trade ties with the DPRK, but other ASEAN nations have not. And this is what U.S. President Donald Trump will be pushing for. He will be pushing for more punitive actions against the DPRK to try to pressure the DPRK to halt its nuclear weapons program. Pandang.
Well, Barnaby, tell us more about this meeting between President Duterte and President Xi Jinping in the Vietnamese city of Da Nang.
Right. Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte and Chinese President Xi Jinping did have a brief meeting back at on the sidelines of the APEC summit, rather, in Da Nang in Vietnam, and it was a very cordial meeting. Before that meeting, President Duterte did say that he will raise the issue of militarization in the South China Sea. And people were probably expecting some friction between Duterte and Chinese President Xi Jinping, but there was no friction at all. President Duterte did make good on his promise to raise the issue, but President Xi Jinping said that China's activities in the South China Sea are nothing, and he assured President Duterte that all countries will maintain freedom of navigation in the South China Sea no matter what. And President Duterte accepted that statement, and they agreed to continue talking about a code of conduct and to continue meeting multilaterally on that code of conduct. So it is a very cordial meeting. President Duterte also thanking Chinese President Xi Jinping for China's help on the Marawi siege and his war on drugs. Panduk.
Thank you very much. Our correspondent Barnaby Low in Manila. And for more on that, let's talk to Professor Song Qingren from the China Institute of Contemporary International Relations in Beijing. Well, Professor, 5 countries have joined the ASEAN Plus framework this time, namely Australia, India, New Zealand, the US and Russia. So will having more Plus members facilitate or slow the integration of this particular region?
Yeah. In the past many years, ASEAN has been the leader for the regional integration process. So under the ASEAN's leadership, now our regional Asia's regional integration process not only including 10 ASEAN member countries, but now it also includes other 8 member countries in Asia Pacific region. So I think ASEAN-led integration process will have a promising future. But on the other hand, since there are more and more countries participating in ASEAN-led integration process, I think there is also some problems facing ASEAN because more and more member countries means there are more and more different interests, different opinions. So it is more and more difficult for ASEAN to coordinate so many members' interests, opinions in leading the regional integration process.
So, Professor, what's your take on the upcoming meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte? Do you think this face-to-face exchange will ease the strained ties between the 2 countries?
Yes, I think this time, after President Trump and President Duterte's meeting tomorrow, the 2 countries' relations will get a turning point. It will become friendly again. We know that last year, due to the former U.S. President Obama administration and the Philippines Duterte administration had many quarrels about 2 country relations. 2 country relations was quarreled. So now, this year, after Donald Trump took power, the 2 country leaders' interactions are becoming more friendly and often than before. So, for example, the President Trump stopped criticizing the President Duterte's administration's anti-drug campaign, and also the U.S. gave some military weapons aid to the Philippines to help it to conduct the anti-drug campaign. And also this year, Donald Trump has telephone calls, discussions with Duterte, President Duterte, and this time Donald Trump specifically extended his trips in Asia to visit the Philippines to meet Duterte, President Duterte, and to attend the East Asia Summit, because Donald Trump's trip this time to Asia is very long. He went to Japan, South Korea, China, Vietnam, but this time he extended his trip to visit the Philippines.
Thank you very much, Professor Song Qingren there. Now we continue our special series, From Vision to Action, exploring how countries in Southeast Asia have benefited from a closer cooperation with China.
The ongoing road project is going to greatly increase patrol efficiency.
West trade between China and Thailand started more than 200 years ago.